In this episode, we will explore the blocks in our organization. What is stopping the flow of value and results?
We will explore how to create a thriving organization that operates at the speed of Formula One. Welcome to episode 21 of the Leading Complexity podcast. This is where we explore the art of leading organizations in today's complex, hyper-competitive landscape. We do this together with some of the world's foremost thinkers in leadership. My name is Tomas Björkholm, and with me I have Mikael Göthe.
In this episode, we will listen to an exciting conversation with Jurriaan Kamer. Jurriaan is a future-oriented organizational change expert. He's a co-founder of Unblock, a modern management consultancy, and a keynote speaker. He has authored the book Formula X, a business novel inspired by the world of Formula One. And he has just released his second leadership book, Unblock, Clear the Way for Results and Develop a Thriving Organization. And that is about unblocking organizations by rethinking strategy, decision-making, teamwork and ownership.
The interview is about 1 hour long, so today we will only look at the first half, and the second part will come next week.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you, Tomas and Mike. I'm really excited to be here and to be talking to you again.
Great. So what I understand is that you've been coaching, working a lot with executives as well. I saw somewhere that you also called your previous role or the Agile CIO, I think. And how did you get started with that? And can you maybe share a bit of your background and your journey to that?
Yeah, so I grew up through the world of software development and IT, like many of us. And I became increasingly frustrated with the rest of the organization, right? So we were doing great things in IT. We were accelerating. We were creating agile teams, adopting fun methodologies to work faster and better. But then over time we bumped into all the traditional management structures that were in the rest of the organization. So at one point I found myself in the boardroom with the CEO of a large financial company, and he was super happy about what we were doing in IT. Like, you should continue that, and it's great. And I was like, you know what, we can go twice as fast, but I think you are the problem. That conversation didn't go down very well, but I think that was mostly because I didn't understand their perspective enough, and I didn't understand the world of management and what else needed to happen outside of IT to get everything done. So I started to study that and to try to find ways to connect with the rest of the organization, and also to find practices outside of Agile that can help leaders and management teams become better leaders.
And this is something I want to hear more about. How do you connect to managers and make them understand that they are actually the problem?
I mean, yeah. So first of all, it starts by learning a lot and observing a lot. So I asked if I could be in the boardroom, being a fly on the wall in some of their management meetings to really, really understand what was going on. I had the trust of some of the senior executives, and that really helped, because then we could have like an honest conversation at one point about, everything you're doing up there is really impacting the teams down here, and let's see if we can find another way. And then I got really lucky by one of the CIOs of this super large financial company. He was willing to adopt agile methodologies in their management teams. Because he was like, I'm telling all of my teams to become more agile and to adopt agile methodologies, but we as managers, we're still doing the same thing. So that is not right. So let's experiment ourselves a little bit as well. We tried a lot of things. We tried to use Scrum in his management team, and that didn't go well. But we adopted some things that helped, and that was really the starting point of a journey where I eventually joined the Ready and started looking at other streams of thought and other management methodologies that are actually really good at unlocking agility in the organization.
So after working with executives and those leaders, is there kind of some key pattern or key learning? What's kind of the biggest takeaway from that?
Oh, there's so many things, but the one thing I always tell people, leaders, is that they actually need to become org designers themselves. right? So many leaders love to talk about the content and love to to get people to report to them, and then they have an opinion and they can talk about the content. But the shift I invite leaders to get into is to if you use traffic analogies, which I use a lot. If you look at the cover of my new book, I asked them to become to stop being a traffic cop, so being on the intersection, directing traffic, going left, going right, but then becoming a road designer, where you are architecting how the work flows through the organization, and you're there to enable that flow to happen and to remove obstacles, including yourself. So it's a new role for leaders that I think is important.
Interesting. You're talking about Agile here, and lately I've seen a lot of posts about Agile being dead. What is your feeling? What is the state of Agile right now, according to you?
Yeah, it's very hard to say. I definitely think that the golden age of Agile is over. The period where everybody needed to be trained, certified, and every company is hiring hundreds of coaches. I think that wave is probably over. But what still remains is the need for organizational speed and agility. That is not going away anytime soon. So I'm also very hopeful that we're seeing a more healthy integration of our capabilities and practices, and rather than this probably unhealthy wave of craziness where we have to do it because everybody else is doing it, etc.
So, is there a new word? Will it be something else?
No, I don't no. I mean, it would be nice if there's a new framework out there that everybody jumps on. Like as consultants, like you are too, that would be nice, and we can jump on that train, and we can make some money. But I think honestly, that's not a healthy thing to have, right? We've had many of those waves, and I think the best work is happening when a leader is acknowledging that their organization, in whatever way or form, is blocking them from making progress. And it's not a framework that they need to buy to solve that, but it's actually introspection, experimenting with practices, experimenting with lots of different frameworks, and picking the things that are most useful. That will unlock the real agility over time. So yeah, on the one hand, I'm hoping for this new wave, but on the other hand, I'm also fearing it. I mean, we see something around OKRs. So there's some waves happening that I think, but I'm also not so happy about. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard.
What are you not so happy about?
I mean, yeah, like it's the same thing is happening with OKRs as is happening with Agile. It's like, oh, we need to roll it out everywhere, and it's going to be the silver bullet for it will solve all of our problems because now we can really work outcomes based. But the reality is that there's many layers behind that and below that people don't take the time to understand and unravel before they drop another framework on people. So it's just I think it's just the pattern of it's a pattern of hierarchical management where you see as a leader at the top you might feel powerless and you're like, this framework is really helping another company, we should do it too, and then as long as we do that, then it's really going to help. And I think it's I know people want to make shortcuts, right? You don't want to do the hard work. You want to do if there's a possibility of a shortcut, you'll take it. So I think that's just human nature as well.
So I think it goes back to this premise of that when things are complex and our pod is leading in complexity. So yeah, people are looking for the quick fix, the kind of good practice to implement or roll out. Yeah. But yeah, in reality, you can learn from these, but you have to really kind of understand why they work in what context they've been working. Yeah. And then see what can we learn from that and how can we adjust it to our context, and then do the kind of hard work of starting experimenting and introducing it. Yeah. Yeah, and I've been preaching that for years. I think must have been 2015 or so that I wrote a piece called "Build Your Own Spotify Model." Yeah. This was at the time where everybody's starting Spotify type transformations. It's still happening in some big companies, and I was just saying, like, I love Spotify. I love the company. I've been there many times, studied their culture, studied the people who work there. I know. You've been involved there as well. So it's an amazing company. But if you're not building a music player that needs to scale internationally, then the model is not going to be the precise right fit for you. If you're building insurances or if you're building manufacturing kitchens, like it's not the same. So yeah. Yeah. So adaptability to your context is very important here. Yeah. So
I guess you agree with me when I say there's a lot of companies out there that are saying they are agile, but they are far from. What would you say is the missing piece? What are the most common thing we are missing when we are trying to be agile but not really succeeding?
That's. I mean, you're a podcast about complexity, right?
Yeah.
If I would have an amazing answer to this, then I wouldn't be honoring the complexity that is involved. I don't know. Like, I think it's already very, very hard to say like a company is agile or it's not agile or it's not so much agile. It's not something you can measure as much as we want to measure it. It's not something that we can put on a scale and the number is 6. You know, it doesn't work that way. I think it's important to look at the local context and figure out because also like I'm also talking about this in the context of organizational speed. Like, you don't need to be faster. You don't need to be going at light speed. You just need to be a little bit faster than your surroundings and a little bit faster than your competitors, and that is good enough, right? So speed is relative, and is not an absolute thing to focus on. So, yeah. And what is missing? I think there's definitely things holding companies back in terms of traditional ways of working, traditional structures. Everybody growing up through the same type of organizational expectations and then applying that everywhere, that is missing. And I also think that we just have to also honor human nature, that people, humans are not really good at understanding complexity in the first place. So we're often deploying complicated solutions to complex problems, and I don't think that will go away really quickly. It will take a long time for people to really grasp that. Creating an annual plan and sticking to the deadlines is not the best way to do something.
So I think it's kind of interesting that the few ones that are really agile, or we kind of have succeeded in that, now the gap is getting further and further away from more the traditional companies, and the traditional they've been trying to install like ready-made frameworks, and now agile has a bad reputation, and then sounds like they're giving up a bit, but then the gap is even increasing.
Yeah.
So will they kind of go learn the lesson and then kind of really introduce it in a better way, or kind of are they more doomed, like the gap will just continue to grow?
Well, it's a pendulum swing, right? So like you say, some companies are firing all of their agile coaches and say, you know what, we don't need this anymore. It's a lot of overhead, and to a certain extent, that is a healthy development where it's like, you know what, this shouldn't be a separate full-time role, maybe, and because we want to ingrain it in our DNA. But then they discover if you completely stop with everything, you'll figure out where the real gaps are, and then you go back and invest in that again. So I think it's a pendulum swing. It is very fragile, as we also can see, meaning that if a new leader at the top comes in and that person just doesn't believe in this new philosophy, then everything is just broken immediately, and we have to find a way for these things to stick better, and for them to become the actual default of working instead of something that is like extra and like I sometimes compare this work to is it candy or is it oxygen that we're bringing to a company?
Oh.
Right? Is it just this little toy that people love to do because people become more happy and motivated? But can we actually do without if we have to be cost conscious? Maybe we cannot do without. But there's some companies that understand that some of this is really oxygen. But there's also lots of companies out there that see it as candy, and they'll find out quickly if they start suffocating.
But it could also be this kind of effect that when you actually start to do something, even if it's the sugar high,
yeah,
you get some attention, you get some focus, you get some small improvement, and you say, oh, this is really working. But
yeah,
you only made a superficial change.
Yeah. That's a challenge for sure.
I like that you mentioned this DNA thing, because I totally agree with you. The agile mindset needs to be integrated in the DNA, kind of.
Yeah.
And I agree with you that the problem is that we might believe it because on the paper it looks very natural, but then suddenly you start working and then it's kind of fall back to the traditional way. And then you think that, those adult coaches, they are just overhead, as you say. But they forget that how important it is to continue all the way until it's really into your DNA, and not even a new CEO will change that. Yeah. So much. Yeah. Lessons. Let's move on. You have this book, Formula X.
Yes.
It took place in a Formula One context. Why did you choose that? And what can business learn from Formula One?
Yeah, so Formula One is an interesting metaphor. Like sports metaphors are always interesting to look at when you think about teamwork and organizing.
Yeah, always using football as...
Yeah, but the problem with football is you only have 11 players. And Formula One, one Formula One team is on average 1,000 people.
A little bit bigger team,
So-
yeah.
Yeah, so it gives you a sense that some of the organizational problems that many companies face have been solved by Formula One in a way that still allows them to be super innovative, super fast, and super engaged. So I've started. Yeah, I watched Formula One for many years just as a fan, but only when I really was able to look behind the scenes and visit one of the teams, I had an idea of how big it was, and I got a sense of some of the organizational practices they use and the type of leadership culture they have. So yeah, since then I've been hooked, and I'm always on the lookout for ideas. And in Formula X, the book is a business fable, as you said. It's similar structure like the Phoenix Project and Patrick Lencioni's work, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and some others. I really liked the narrative structure to just get people inspired. And it's actually not taking place in a Formula One team. It takes place at a kitchen factory, where the managing director of the kitchen factory has to reduce his time to market to 1 week. You buy the kitchen now and you get it delivered in 1 week. Otherwise you don't need to pay, which is a crazy target. If you ever bought a kitchen, it can take months. And then he tries the traditional way, that doesn't work out, and then he at one point in time gets invited to visit a Formula One race, and he gets acquainted with the team principal of the Formula One team. And then over time, he starts applying those lessons. So that's the story, and it's a fun thing. It's a very short theoretical chapter at the end, but it's mostly just fun reading for Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, that's a nice one. I remember listening to it and really, inspiring and intriguing. So yeah, I can really recommend that one. But lately, you've written another book.
Yeah.
Unblock, Clear the Way for Results. So yeah, how come you decided to write this second book?
Yeah, so it was 6 or 7 years later. I learned a lot in those 7 years, and I applied a lot of things. And I decided to write a new book which contains those lessons, like all the things that I've over the years learned that consistently created results. But it's so the subtitle is not only Clear the Way for Results, it's also Develop a Thriving Organization. So I think it's a combination of giving leaders the tools to unblock their organization and to introduce new practices that can help them achieve their things. And it's I don't know. So like I was very much on the sideline involved in Brave New Work, which is another great book. And I think there was space for a book that builds on some of the theoretical concepts and the inspirational ideas, but also be very practical. And that's what this book is.
In the book, you mentioned some common blockers. I think you're mentioning like 6 of them. Maybe we can go through them one by one, because I think they are really interesting topics. Starting with strategy. What are the common challenges and how can you unblock them?
Yeah, so often when we work with leaders, they're like, we have a new strategy, but we're having problems executing it. We're having problems making it real, and then some leaders point at the organization, or point at the culture, or point at some of other things, and then we say, well, let's point at the strategy first. Is your strategy really helping? Or is it actually hindering progress? Because a lot of times the strategy is sometimes written as a fluffy statement on the wall that doesn't create any focus, and people are like, oh yeah, I can agree to this. Like, we want to be the best in the world for our shareholders and our community, and blah 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 blah. Like, it doesn't really help. And you can get into the realm of the purpose statement or the mission statement or whatever it is, but sometimes that is also the strategy, which means there is no strategy. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you often see long lists of all the tasks and projects and priorities that need to be created. So the strategy is this 50-page slide deck with all the must-win battles and all the important priorities, which also means that people drown in that and say, you know what, it's either on the list or it's not, and it doesn't really help tap into the wisdom of the people that work there. It's like we just have to follow these orders. So that also doesn't help sometimes. And what we're really looking for is something in the middle, a strategy that is both concrete but also inspiring, that creates focus, and but so it does tell you a direction of where we need to go, but it doesn't prescribe all the different solutions that we need to build in the middle. What really helps is we make that strategy a little bit longer term. So we focus on 2 to 3 years, or maybe 4 or 5 years as a point on the horizon, rather than the annual plan or the 100-year mission, you know. So that helps.
Yeah. When you talk strategy, because what I see as one thing is that a lot of companies, they are thinking of the product strategy only. Mm-hmm. But I think that we need to have more strategies, like we need to have the process and culture strategy, mm-hmm. or how to implement being more agile, being faster, more flexible, and all things. Have you seen this? I mean, what is a common, according to your experience? Are they talking about both product strategy or acquiring another company strategy, or are they also looking into the culture?
It depends who you're talking to.
Yeah.
And depending on what level of the organization you talk to. What I also always recommend is say, you know what, if you have the ambition to achieve a certain product or financial goal, you have to ask yourself, what are the things we're going to do, and what are the things we're not going to do to get there? You know, what are we willing to sacrifice to achieve our goal? And you have to be super clear about that, and you have to create a hypothesis of what will help you win. So you can also be wrong. It's also important to know. And that underneath that, I encourage people to think about, okay, so you have like a top level strategy. What does that mean for this department? Or what does that mean for a culture? What does that mean for a need? What are the technical capabilities that need to be achieved for that to happen? So you get almost like a web of strategic intent statements that are helping each other out. So I always say, like, a strategy is a fractal. So it happens at every level. If you want it or not, it does happen at every level, and you have to it's really helpful to make it explicit at every level, to say, and I know Spotify has done a really good job at this with, what was it called again? I remember a picture with the bets and the bet framework.
The rhythm.
The rhythm, yeah, Spotify rhythm. It's a really good example of creating strategy at every level, and creating alignment and focus at every level. And over time, all of those bets feed into the same overarching mission and vision of where the company wants to go.
Yeah, but even Spotify, as far as I saw, it was a couple of years ago since I was there, but at that time it was only, I would say, product strategy. They didn't really look into the culture strategy. So even Spotify can learn. Right.
Yeah, that's true. And I think, and maybe you don't need to write down what kind of culture you need to be when you are already that culture. You know, of course it's, and I know there's many different expressions of the culture. There were principles on the wall. Like, I've seen a lot of that. Yeah. But in the end, it's like, what are the obstacles we need to overcome? How well do we understand their market, and what are our most important shifts that we need to achieve so that we can actually win, and that's what strategy is. And
I can really resonate or recognize the problem that with these fluffy kind of high aiming statements, and then if you go into the more daily work, there's often as a roadmap of deliverables. Mm-hmm. So they talk about it as the strategic kind of outcomes or the strategic topics, but actually it's just a plan. And of course, everything becomes then as equal importance. Mm-hmm. So people are really struggling with what are the priorities. Yeah,
and I think what you want, and ultimately, and I wrote about that in the beginning of the book, is this state of high autonomy and high alignment, where you do want everything to add up to something bigger, but you also want to keep a high level of autonomy. And for that, you need to have this strategy statement there. Because if you give people a plan, a roadmap, and that's the only thing you give them, they might just follow it without, while maybe they discover in complexity, they will learn a lot what works and what doesn't work, but you cannot feed that back into the roadmap because that's the roadmap, that's the strategy. But if you say like, hey, we want to go in that direction, it's pretty clear that we need to go there, figure out how, then you actually tap into the wisdom of the talent, the professionals that you already have in your organization, and allow them to figure out and solve those problems with you. And of course, a roadmap might be helpful as a tool, but don't call the roadmap the strategy. Then you're missing the point.
And I think that leads into your second blocking of the steering. I see there's a lot of challenges in kind of executing on the strategy, or because again, if it's a plan, then you've foreseen something, but that's not what's happening in the reality. I suppose that's a challenge. So yeah, how do you see the steering block? Yeah,
so steering is all about adopting ways to steer continuously and to work in 90-day cycles. Like there could be longer or shorter term cycles as well. Like I know, like Agile promotes shorter cycles, but I think on the company rhythm, it's good to look at 90 days as a place, because it's far enough that you can actually make a dent into something, but it's also short enough then that to put something concrete down. And I think Facebook at one point in time was famous for saying like, plan really long term and really short term, but nothing in between. And I really still believe in that concept, because people really generally know what they need to do next based on a longer term perspective, and everything else that you plan in the future beyond that, it's just you can do that, but it will just be a waste of time because stuff will change a lot. So how to do it is to create a rhythm of explicit outcomes at every level of every team. OKRs does some of that work in some companies. The 90-day outcomes that I practice at Unblock are a little bit more simpler and a little bit more flexible for that. But in the end, the objective of these systems are the same. And the other thing I write about in the book is steering metrics, which is a type of metric that a team or a department uses themselves. So they own it, which is important, and they can change the metric that they're following. But they're always looking for what is the metric that we need to move next, rather than having huge dashboards of KPIs or falling into the trap of setting a KPI and then that being connected to your annual performance management cycle, which creates all sorts of behavior you don't want. So it's really like figuring out what are the metrics we need to follow, and what are the outcomes we need to follow, and that's basically it. That's steering.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say that in most cases the outcomes that you need to follow, those are typically translated to still deliverables, and you're not really focusing on the outcome on the result. You're just kind of following the same plan.
Yeah, there's definitely the advice there, especially for software IT related teams, is to get as much strategic and customer thinking in those teams as possible, where it's like, what is the behavior we're really trying to influence here, rather than what's the product we need to build. That's in the end that's from going from output to outcome is a big shift. It's an important shift, and I think we should try to aim for that every time we can.
Yeah, definitely. Let's break for today. The second part of the interview will be in the next episode, released next week.
And we are curious about your reflections as always, so please share your comments and join us next week for the second part of this interview. If you want to learn more about leading in complexity, we suggest that you check out all the earlier episodes. You can find them at theleadingcomplexity.com/podcasts, or search for Leading Complexity Podcasts on YouTube or Spotify. And remember to subscribe to our channel.
Thank you.
Thanks. See you next week.